And then perhaps we can move on to what we call the reincarnation cycle. Because then we have discussed reincarnation, and then afterwards we can discuss karma. How we can put all these ideas into practice. But here we see ourselves again, so the imperishable part and the learning part and the perishable part, or the body or the vehicle. And we have these spheres accordingly, if you will. And this is how the reincarnation cycle is taking place. So we see from our birth on, we enter the material sphere where we pick up or take up that body of flesh in our case, and then we lead a life. We are in the more active side of our being, and then we lead a life, and then eventually, if everything goes in a natural manner, then at a certain point we use up what Dr. de Brucker calls our life force, and then we come near what we call death. So you see that we live in all these spheres. Well, we are conscious right now, due to our lack maybe of development, due to our lack of knowledge, we are conscious now in a certain part of that sphere, and that creates our cycle of birth and death. So just to go on, just to tell something about what happens after death is when we reach the first moment there on the right, and if it happens naturally, then you will be, probably have reached a certain age, and then maybe with the last heartbeat or the last brain activity, what happens is that we see our life as a film that kind of runs before our eyes. And that's what you often hear about people having had a certain experience and then maybe coming back, as you can call it, near-death experience. But if you've reached that point and you see what we call the first panoramic vision, and what happens is that you see everything that has happened in your lifetime as a film, like I said. And then what happens is that the upper or the higher part of yourself sees that life and also sees everything in the cause and effect relationship. So it sees, it understands why things have happened as they have happened. So you see the order, or you see the karma, if you will. You see the cause and effect. And that happens there. And that is a very spiritual, a very useful experience. Because sometimes we may think that we learn only in our more active phase. But that is a very important point where you learn from your experiences after you died, biologically that is. Because there is still a threat then from the higher soul to the body. So that's a very important moment that you see that happening. And it can take as much as a couple of hours, maybe up to 8 hours, it has been said. And that's, for any soul, it's a crucial moment in time where you see your life and you learn lessons that you perhaps did not during the active phase of your life. So with that knowledge, it's very important that people who are dead in a biological sense can have these hours in calm and peace, so they can experience the panoramic vision in a calm setting. So it is up to us, basically, also from a theosophical point of view, to make that available, to make that happen for the deceased. Very important moment. And then after a couple of hours, then the film has ended, if you will. And then the soul or the higher part goes on. And the vehicle is cut loose, so to speak. So the golden thread, it is also called, is actually cut. And then the soul removes itself, if you will, from the body. But that's only after hours, after the biological death. And then is what we call, well, then the soul enters what we call Kama Loka, which is an area, we just spoke about the lower energies that we work with during our lives. Well, so this is, so to speak, an area, a sphere, where all those lower energies are having their life, if you will. So it's filled with all our lower desires, our lower feelings, and that is happening there. And what's happening is that the soul is living through, is actually working through every lower energy it has fed during its lifetime. So for instance, if you truly wanted to be a millionaire and you focused your lifetime on that and you gave it a lot of energy and you gave that desire, you fed it and you fed it and you made it huge, then in that sphere you will work through that energy. And you have to work through that energy eventually to be able to move past it. So all those energies are there. If you've been fighting with your neighbor your whole life, then probably your neighbor is who you will meet in that atmosphere. Because you have to work through any kind of lower energy that you have been feeding your entire life. And obviously, depending on how you've led your life, you will be in this sphere longer or shorter period of time. So if you were a person that was very caught up in everything material and everything personal, then you will have to stay in that atmosphere, obviously, a longer period of time than if you were a very spiritual person. And perhaps you were focused on spiritual or idealistic images. So what we're doing here is letting go. You're letting go of the lower layers of yourself. Your body to begin with, but then also the lower energies that you built up in yourself. So you're like a hot air balloon that is going back to the spiritual sphere, but you have to lose all the dead weight, you have to lose the sacks of sand in the other spheres in order for you to be able to go to the most spiritual point of your being. And that's happening here in the middle. And that can be up to a few weeks or maybe a few months, all in accordance to how you have lived your life. And when that is ended, when we have worked through all these energies and all these images and everything that we built up our entire lives, then we go to what we call the second panoramic vision. So it is basically a second time that you see your whole life as a film. And there too, you learn your lessons on why your life was as it was. So there too is a very important moment in time when you look back and then you learn and then you grow. And that's right before you enter the more spiritual sphere. So then you have let go of the lower parts of yourself. And everything in yourself that was just, that was idealistic, that was loving, and everything that resonated, the beauty that you essentially are, you're going to bring back to your most spiritual sphere that you can probably, or that you can be in. So it's a journey in a very literal sense. And a spiritual sphere we can also call Devachan, which means a world of gods. So it's who you are It's that part of yourself. And in that part, if you will, you are experiencing your Devachan. And the more ideals you have been feeding, the more you have worked for in order for the harmony that everyone can enjoy, for instance, the longer you will stay in that sphere. And that can take from a couple of 100 years up to even a couple of 1,000 years. So, but it all depends on us, how long we have to work through things here in the Kamaloka, and also how long we will experience our Devachan. And a very concrete example is if, for instance, you have been working your whole life to eradicate poverty, for instance, and to work for a world that is more just and where all people can enjoy every means that is available on the planet, then probably in Devachan, your dream, your more spiritual dream, so to speak, will happen. So that is what you will experience. That is how it literally is being described. And that can take a lot of time where you experience a spiritual bliss, so to speak. And then afterwards, because no matter how beautiful it is, and it is because you're basically in the heart of yourself, you're basically in your own inner God, if you will. But no matter how blissful that is, there comes a point when you eventually want to or feel drawn to go back to the more material sphere. Why? Because you yearn the experience and you yearn the growth and you yearn for, you have a longing for being there where you are in the spiritual sphere, but then self-consciously, so you can be it, not only experience it in a sort of dreamlike fashion. So some sort of thirst, if you will, comes into being, and then you'll be drawn to the more material sphere. And then before you re-enter the material sphere, before you re-enter the world, if you will, as a soul that's coming back, you'll see a third panoramic vision. And in that vision, you'll see the life that you are about to have. So in the other two, you saw the life that you had, and you took your lessons from that, which you now have engraved in your own character, which you took with you in the spiritual sphere. So it made you, in a very literal sense, a better person. You take that all back, and you see now the panoramic vision that gives you insight in what you're about to experience. So you see your whole life as a film before you, and the life that you are going to live. And in a very similar manner, you see the righteousness, you see the beauty, you see karma working. So you see the order, you see the causes and effects. And it is said that somewhere from within you, you say, yes, you accept what you're about to go through. You accept what you're about to experience. Because you can see it in a broader spectrum, if you will. And with that third panoramic vision, you re-enter the material sphere. And then you are born as a baby. And that's why, because we've done it a lot of times, that's why as a child, we tremendously rapidly go to our first phases of development. We can do that because we've done it many, many, many times before. So the first stages of life go very, very rapidly. And then at about age 21, you'll be who you were when you died the last time. So you'll be there where you probably left off the last time, and then the cycle can move on. Now, like I said, this is only a cycle in that sphere because we're not yet awakened in the entire sphere. So because we've developed to a certain point, but not entirely, so our consciousness doesn't rise up or doesn't encompass the entire sphere, and that's why we have the experience of birth and death. But you might say that a Buddha is very much awake in Devachan. So he doesn't have to necessarily experience this cycle in this sphere. In other spheres, it's a different story, but in this sphere. So you can say that if we, as we develop ourselves further and further along, that we become more and more awake also in the higher spheres. And then that obviously influences the way we experience this process. And that's why it's also possible that a Buddha, for instance, can see over lives. So he sees many, 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 many lives as a chain. He can oversee them, where we can only oversee this small bit, which is a very small bit. So that's the cycle of reincarnation. And after the break, I want to talk to you about karma and what we can do with this information and how we can help each other and ourselves to become more and more conscious about this process, but also about the process of creating your own self, your own character, your own life, and eventually creating the world as we know it. And karma is very difficult to understand without knowledge of reincarnation, because we also tend to have to look over several lives. So that's after the break, how we create, in a very literal sense, ourselves. Now this is what I wanted to talk to you about in relation to the reincarnation cycle. Are there maybe questions or comments on this? Yes?
I was wondering, it sounds very hopeful that you learn from your panoramic vision, but if your characteristic in life was that you don't want to learn much, then my panoramic vision is, don't give me the lessons I didn't want to learn in my life. So what is the quality of, is there a difference in the quality of panoramic vision?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Well, that's a very good question. Well, thankfully, the part with which we experience the panoramic vision is our higher self. So is the reincarnating ego, as we also call it. But it's this part. So basically, no matter who we were in our personality that we created maybe for in this life, and no matter how much it resisted learning, or no matter how much it resisted gaining knowledge or what have you, it will not hamper you in terms of drawing conclusions from the panoramic vision, because it's not your personality that is drawing those conclusions. It's the reincarnating ego, so it's your higher self that does. It's the higher part of yourself that does. And that is above any maybe, lower desire that you may have had during your lifetime. So in terms of quality, it'll always be much better than what you probably were able to produce, especially in the sense that you're saying right now, during your lifetime. So that's actually a very hopeful thought. So also the people who are like hopelessly always stepping into the same pitfalls, and you say, oh, why are they doing that to themselves, and why aren't they learning, and they don't want to learn, and also they will learn from the panoramic vision, and they will take those lessons into the Devachan, because it's their higher self, not their lower self that is, maybe resisting or not willing or what have you.
But according to your own characteristic, that's...
Well, your higher characteristic.
Yeah.
So that's what it sees, that's what it views. So it's your most wise self that sees that life. And you have to remember that during different lives you'll probably have different characteristics in your personality. So maybe you have, one life where the personality resists learning. It doesn't want to learn. It wants to make, certain mistakes constantly all over again. But then in the next life, or maybe a life before that, then it was very eager to learn. So the higher soul sees like a red thread through maybe tens or hundreds of lives, as where we have the tendency to look at one life and say, well, it's, this has failed, or I haven't learned enough, or he didn't do as well as he could. But that's just one life. And you don't know what happened before, and you don't know what will happen after. So that's why the masters say, that theosophists should learn to think in centuries, or learn to think in many lives. There's a lot of things that we don't know, that we are unable to judge in that sense also. Yeah. But what happens in the personality is of little influence of what the higher soul, the higher self learns. Yeah. Is that? Yeah. Maybe more questions, comments? Yes.
You told about the panoramic vision, and that it's a moment of clarity where you see your past life, the balance of cause and effect. I wonder, does that also pertain to fact-checking? I mean, suppose a person had a misconception about the world, a certain person, but he was wrong. For example, you think this person robbed your parents. And then you take actions upon that.
Oh, right, yeah.
But that person did not rob your parents at all.
Yeah.
At the panoramic vision, of course, you see the cause and effect of whatever it is the action you took based on that. But do you also see if that person did what you think it did?
I reckon you would. I reckon you would see cause and effect as neutrally as you can. So the lesson there, it would be a very important lesson, would be, hey, not everything I see is automatically true. And I think one aspect of karma, we'll be talking about it after the break, is that you may think that you perceive something that's happening. Now that will be a karmic cause and effect relation there, but that you think that somebody robbed your parents, for instance.
It's a silly example.
No, of course. But the notion that many times we have no idea what's truly happening is a very important lesson. Is very important. Think about it, because now you have a very concrete example. But how many times in our lives does exactly this happen? That we form images around maybe a situation, around people. So, and then the images we form and we feed in ourselves become so real to us. But because we're not very much evolved yet, or maybe most of us, we don't have the powers, we don't have the ability to see in a very neutral sense what's happening, what the cause and effects are. So I think this will be a very good example of what you do see in a panoramic vision, is the very neutral cause and effect, and also that person that you reacted to in a certain way perhaps did not do what you think they did. Yeah, because that will probably be also of influence for your next life. How you reacted to that situation, the perception of that will come back to you in some form. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a very hopeful thought.
It is. It's tremendously hopeful because it elevates us so far above our personal views of each other, of ourselves, of the world, and we all have these moments. So it's also very inspiring for people who have you have probably or maybe seen suffering throughout their lives, and then hey, that moment is going to come that they will see, that they will have clear vision. And they will take those lessons into their blissful sleeping period, if you will. And they will take also the lessons learned, if you will, back into a next life. So you cannot change karma in that sense, but it will change your perception of life and also how you react on what life is showing you, which is always yourself. Yeah. Yes?
You said about the moment in the material sphere that the person experiencing life becomes the person that he was.
Yeah.
He died in the previous life.
Yeah.
Can you explain this a bit more? When is it happening and
Sure.
what's the change that comes in the new life?
Oh, okay, yeah. So, yeah. No, good question. So when we leave our body behind, and then we leave, so to speak, our personality behind in the Kamaloka, and then we move all the way up to who we essentially are, and then we go back to birth, and in a sense, that is a process of letting go. You're letting go stuff in order to reach the highest spheres of your own being. And then when you come back, you have to pick up stuff. So you're going through this atmosphere, for instance, and there you're picking up what you have left behind, because everything is a reflection of yourself. So basically, you're picking up all the energies that you worked on in a previous phase, and then you pick up eventually even a body. And the rapid development that we experience it comes to an end sort of when we're 21, more or less. Those are our average numbers. I mean, it can happen sooner, it can happen later, because then we have developed our bodies, then we have developed our emotional self, we have developed our higher self, so we have picked up everything, we have developed everything that we left behind when we died in a previous life. So that's why we're more or less the same person when we are 21 as when, or who we were when we died in a previous life. And then after that, after the picking up, then we start to push our development further, if you will. So, and then as adults, we become responsible for our own actions, for our own thoughts, and then we continue on our path of development in phase after phase after phase, because a lifetime consists of several phases. Yeah. I think we have also in an English version, perhaps Lucifer on that, of one of the symposium, where it is in detail explained how this works, and also how youth works. You know, what happens in a child's mind, in a child's consciousness, and how it evolves into being a grown-up, and how the picking up part is working. Yeah, so from more or less 21 on, you're there, and then you move on your path. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah? Yeah. Then perhaps till about 3:30 for a cup of coffee and everything. Thanks.